The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus addressed this parable to those who were convinced of their own righteousness and despised everyone else. Two people went up to the temple area to pray. One was a Pharisee and the other was a tax collector. The Pharisee took up his position and spoke this prayer to himself. O God, I thank you that I am not like the rest of humanity, greedy, dishonest, adulterous, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and I pay tithes on my whole income. But the tax collector stood off at a distance and would not even raise his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast and prayed, O God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, the latter went home justified, not the former. For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and the one who humbles himself will be exalted. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. We have another ridiculous parable told to us by Jesus today. The Pharisee in this story, like last weekend, is just another really over-the-top bad guy. Here he is in the temple. The temple is, of course, the place of worship, the worship of the one true God. And here's how this Pharisee worships God. He says, O God, I thank you that I am not like the rest of humanity, greedy and dishonest and adulterous, or even evil like this tax collector. I fast twice a week, and I pay tithes on my whole income. So this guy's prayer is, if you want to call it that, is not the worship of God. It is the worship of himself. In fact, it says that in the passage. I don't know if it's just a quirk of the English translation, but it says, the Pharisee took up his position and spoke this prayer to himself. So it even says that he's praying to himself. Once again, Jesus is creating a character that is, the scum of the earth, right? He's a character that's easy to dislike. And then on the other hand, we have the tax collector. The tax collector whose prayer is one of, humble acknowledgement that he is a sinner, that he can do nothing without God's mercy. And, Jesus often turns the tables on us. The Pharisee, well, he's supposed to be the religious leader. The Pharisees were experts in God's law. The Pharisees were the moral authorities of the land. But he's the bad guy. And a tax collector, well, tax collectors, they were considered traitors in the time of Jesus. A Jew working for the pagan Roman oppressors. A Jew paid for by the enemy to rob God's chosen people. And yet he's the one who has it all straight. When it comes to the Gospels and reflecting upon them, it's always good to place yourself in the story itself, to walk in the shoes of one of the characters in the story, to see things from their perspective, to relate to them in some way. And I think for us, because we know that the tax collector is the good guy in the story, we think that we relate to the tax collector. And that's the temptation in this case, to put ourselves only in the shoes of the tax collector. We recognize the ridiculousness of the Pharisee in the story and his sinfulness. We say to ourselves, well, I can't relate to that Pharisee. I'm not that crazy. I'm not that evil. I am, in fact, a repentant sinner who comes to God humbly and honestly. But how about we allow Jesus to turn the tables on us again? How about we propose that none of us are the tax collector in the story, and that all of us are the Pharisee in the story. I am the Pharisee in this story. Father, how can you say that about us? How dare you compare us to that jerk? You expect me to put money in the basket after calling me that? Well, first of all, I don't expect anybody to put any money in the basket. That's your personal choice that you need to work out with God. And second of all, I know how ridiculous this character is. So to call my most faithful parishioners that attend Mass, all of you, the Pharisee. But remember, I'm calling myself a Pharisee too, so we're in the same boat together. And Jesus' parables, they're always meant to get our attention, so he exaggerates to catch us off guard. He exaggerates to catch our ear. Of course, I know that you probably aren't going to God in prayer saying how great you are to God. I don't think that at all. Like I said, you're my most faithful parishioners that attend church. But let's put ourselves in the shoes of the Pharisee this time. Here's what I mean when I say that we are the Pharisees in the story. I say that we're the Pharisee because we're not the tax collector. We're not the outcast. We're not the other. If we come to church with any regularity, you are the Pharisee. If you think you live an upstanding life on the straight and narrow, you are the Pharisee. If you feel like you do enough to help the poor, you're a Pharisee. If you feel like you are kind and welcoming, you are the Pharisee. If you are content and happy in your relationship with God, you are the Pharisee. If it's been longer than 3 months since your last confession, you're definitely the Pharisee. Well, Father, I haven't done anything wrong. Why would I need to go to confession? Exactly, Pharisee. If you leave church as soon as possible without talking to your fellow parishioner, you're the Pharisee. If you see someone new at church and don't think that it's your place or your responsibility to reach out to them to welcome them, then you're the Pharisee. If you care about what someone else is wearing in church, you're the Pharisee. If you find yourself complaining about someone else, you're the Pharisee. If you don't know how to approach someone who is suffering physically or spiritually or mentally, then you're the Pharisee, because you approach them like you would approach anyone else, with humanity, grace, and love. If you think, I'll leave that up to the professionals, or I'll help them if they ask me for help, well, then you're the Pharisee. If you feel sorry for someone else's problems without reaching out, then you're the Pharisee. If you talk about someone else's problems, even if you are helping them out, then you are the Pharisee. If you think, Father, I'm not the Pharisee, well, that's exactly who you are. If you find yourself talking about others rather than talking with others, you're the Pharisee. And if you're seeing red right now, if your ears have shut off, if what I'm saying makes you angry, then that's understandable, because it angers me too. I'm a Pharisee just like you. And it turns out that's who we are in this parable. There's no way we can't be the Pharisee in this parable, because we aren't the tax collector. We do, in fact, try to live on the straight and narrow, like the Pharisee. If we aren't the outcast, if we aren't the tax collector, then we are the Pharisee. We fit in his shoes better. We observe the law. We are faithful. Those are good things. But I think the caution that Jesus is giving us is to not fall for the sin of the Pharisee, even though we are the Pharisee. When I lived in Lincoln as a priest, when I was assigned to the parish of North American Martyrs in Northwest Lincoln, I hated living in Lincoln. I'm a country boy at heart, but I love that parish. It's a special place, and from what I've told from other priests, it's really the only parish like it in our diocese. There aren't very many parishes like it anywhere. It's mostly lower middle class, really young families. They all had to work together really hard to build their church and to build their school from the ground up. It's a fairly new parish within the last 30 years. And for years, they had to meet for Mass in a hotel conference room until they saved up enough money to build their own church. And so the parishioners there took a lot of ownership in their parish, and it's very, very community-oriented. Now, like I said, I'm a country boy, and I love it out here in what the other priests of the diocese refer to as the Wild West. And I'm at home here, and I can't really see myself being a priest anywhere east of Holdridge. But there is a reason that people like us live in the middle of nowhere, because we like it here in the middle of nowhere, right? We don't mind that our neighbors might be a couple miles away, but living in and near a small town can come with some spiritual challenges. It makes us all capable of committing the sins of the Pharisee in our parable today. It becomes easy to just be our own person and to look out for number one. It becomes easy to keep others at arm's length. And it becomes easy to judge because we know everybody else's problems. Gossip is the way that we get the news, not the newspaper or TV. People tend to feel less welcome in small towns if they're coming in from the outside. And I can see why. Now, I'm just going to give you an example. I'm not complaining about this because I am antisocial at heart, but outside of like baptism and first communion parties, I can count on one hand the number of times I've been invited to somebody's house for a meal, which is really unusual. This is a unique place in that sense. Normally, as a priest, you're being pulled in a million different directions, getting invited out for every meal to somewhere else, somebody else's house. But like I said, I appreciate my privacy, so I'm not complaining. I'm just giving an example that we have to be careful to avoid isolating ourselves, which causes, holes in our community. That's a dangerous way to live. There are people in this town who are not Catholic because they don't feel that they would be welcomed. There are people in this town who don't go to church because they don't think that they would be welcomed. And there are people who have moved away from this town because they didn't feel welcomed. And that is a tragedy. That's a failure on our part as Christians. The greatest scandal that we can commit as a Christian is to push those away who are in need of a community. That makes us a laughingstock in the minds of atheists and people who practice other faiths, that we're hypocrites, us Christians. I'll never pick sides in small town drama. I'm kind of past that point in my life. And so it doesn't matter what side you fall on, or whether or not someone had a good reason to feel like they weren't welcome. The fact is that they don't feel welcome in the first place. And that's something that we need to do everything in our power to stop. But like I said, I'm the Pharisee too, and I'm a part of the small town problem, and as a priest that's frustrating because I feel like a coach. I'm supposed to, give you the tools you need to win. But this is a homily, and this is a topic that I have little to offer in terms of a fix to these sorts of things, because I don't know how to change attitudes or change minds. I don't know how to fix decades of feuds and bad blood. It's something that can be only fixed by our choice as individuals to reach out to others, by looking into ourselves and realizing that we are in fact the Pharisee and not the tax collector. This is a difficult conversation to have with ourselves, a difficult conversation to have with God, really examining ourselves and knowing that we can always serve others better. When we feel like we've gotten to a good place in life, a good place in our faith, it actually means that we have a lot further to go. We have to go deeper. If we aren't uncomfortable with where we are in our faith, then we're not growing in our faith. If we are not uncomfortable in our faith, then we're not changing for the better. But the good thing is that Jesus was a Pharisee. That is the religious upbringing that he had. He would have been raised and taught by Pharisees. Jesus was also a small town boy, just like we're small town people. And that's where he was raised. That's how he grew up. It's possible to be a Pharisee and be good. There are a lot of good things about the Pharisees. They were faithful to God's law. There are a lot of good things about living in or near a small town. Everybody knows your name. Everybody's a neighbor. So we can be good Pharisees even though we're not the tax collector, even though we're not among the marginalized, even though we're not the outcast. We can still live the gospel. It's possible to live a life of love, the life of Christ, no matter where you are in life, no matter whether you're not or not you are the Pharisee or the tax collector. It's possible to welcome others rather than simply being content with ourselves.